for 20 years at the park, from the time you're 28 to the time I was 48. And when you go through that, you can't imagine what Opryland was. The people there, the job. We worked 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and certainly would have worked more because it was who we were. It was really a magic, magic time of my life. I can imagine who I'd be or even where I'd be if it wasn't for Opryland. And the people that I met there. It's just incredible. It really was.
We'd come over the hill on Briley Parkway and see the sign, that old sign with the O was like part of a guitar. They had like a guitar. Oh, it was really exciting. When you were in the parking lot, you could see over the trees, you could see the log ride. And that was always so exciting, you know. And it's funny because it still smells like Opryland over there, and lots of memories come back.
In the 1960s and 1970s, in a world where there was a lot of chaos and a lot of scary things on television, Opryland was a safe place to go. It was very innocent, and that's why it worked.
It was magical. It really was magical. It touched so many people's hearts. Those are just wonderful memories that no one's ever going to take away from me.
In the early 1970s, the Grand Ole Opry was owned by National Life and Accident Insurance Company, and it was still located at the Ryman Auditorium. National Life decided to move the Opry to a new building and envisioned an entire entertainment complex to accompany it. On May 27, 1972, the gates swung wide open at Opryland, USA, the home of American music. It was the first major theme park dedicated to live performances. For 26 years, the park entertained music fans from Nashville and the world.
The need to build another Opry house was kind of the catalyst that started all of that. And Irving Waugh, who was the president of WSM at that time, he felt like that we needed another attraction. If we were going to build the Opry House, we needed another attraction to help bring people into Nashville who might not necessarily be country music fans, but once we got them there, we would convert them, and they would become country music and Grand Ole Opry fans. So it was decided that we would build a themed park.
A gentleman by the name of Irving Waugh, who was my predecessor as the president of the company, he became fascinated with the idea of not just a new Opry house, but because of the draw that the Opry had, the idea evolved to build an attraction and give these people that came distances something more than just going to a country music show. We'll give them a theme park. The idea probably originated with a fellow by the name of Elmer Alley. Elmer was a very creative gentleman with WSM television, actually. There were no what we would call actually musical theme parks. So the thought occurred that this could be a music park.
And then as it grew, the theme park was a basis by which to entertain the people who were coming into town to see the Grand Ole Opry. The Opry had really outgrown the Ryman, so the theme park became that backyard for the Grand Ole Opry fans coming into town on Friday and Saturday. Some would stay over Sunday. That also expanded the appeal of Nashville.
The Grand Ole Opry moved out to the Opry House in 1974, and the Opryland Resort and Convention Center opened in 1977. What was once a sleepy area of eastern Davidson County was now a thriving entertainment center.
All of that land was Rudy's farm, which was, a place that we toured when we were kids on field trips. And when they built Opryland, I mean, it was just the talk of the neighborhood because up till then, the only theme park any of us had ever been to was Six Flags over Atlanta. And so we were just excited beyond belief, and it very quickly kind of became the place to go.
The idea that coming to Music City, USA really was probably the catalyst that said, you got to do something with music and entertainment in the theme park. And you already had Six Flags in Georgia, and you had Six Flags in Texas, and you had Six Flags over everywhere. You had Kings Island up in Cincinnati, and those were all rides park. And then you had Disney, it was all animation and cartoon characters. That was their niche. So we felt like that we could go in and do music in Music City, USA, and do live shows with live musicians, everything being live, nothing taped, would give us another little point of difference that we could market. And as it turned out, we were right.
When they first started it in the 70s, they thought, how can we be different? And the great thing about being here in Nashville and Music City is that there's this abundance of talent, and let's do that. Every park has rides. Every park has games. Let's do something that other people can't do as easily. Let's call upon this great pool of talent and write these amazing shows.
The park was built at a cost of $28 million, and it was divided into 7 distinct entertainment areas: the Riverside, New Orleans, the Hill Country, the Plaza, the Lakeside, the American West, and the Mod area, later to be called Doo-Wah-Diddy City. The State Fair area was added in 1975, and the Grizzly River area would be added in 1981. Took a lot of talented people, both on stage and off, to make things run smoothly.
When we were developing our hiring plan, the departments turned in their needs and so forth. We needed 1,200 employees to open the park. And I was thinking, where in the world, and how am I going to get 1,200 employees in here? I had 12,000 applicants the first year. I have to tell you, on that opening day when we opened it, we stood out there in the parking lot just waiting for those long lines on Briley Parkway to totally bottleneck everything. We had 5,000 people that first day, and we said, oh, those of us who had left other jobs and came here thinking this was going to be it, was this really going to work? Well, it didn't take long. It's word of mouth, and yeah, it's going to work, and people came, and the product was good. The economics research group that we hired to do the study, they said that we would be lucky to do 600,000 people the first year. And we did 1.2 million. So we doubled their projection. And it just grew from there.
Yeah, we way undershot that. And we were overwhelmed. We were just overwhelmed. We had no idea we were going to have that many people. I don't remember how many people came, but we didn't have enough Coke stands. We didn't have enough food stands. We didn't have enough entertainment value, really. And we immediately started booking Opry acts, like 4 a day, 4 different acts a day, just to give more entertainment value to the people that came, because we just never conceived that we were going to have that many people at first.
The story that we attempted to tell, and I think we did a pretty darn good job of it, was that this was America's musical showplace, and you could get a little piece of Americana in architecture. You could get a little piece of Americana in landscaping. You could get a little piece of Americana in the music, and music was our key. That's what we sold. We never tried to build the biggest, the baddest, the fastest ride in the country, because if we did, we'd be outspent by whether it be Disney or Paramount or at the time, or whether it be Six Flags and so forth, because that's what they were noted for. They were noted for the big rides. Opryland was known and recognized, and that's what we pushed, was the music and the variety of music. not only could you hear the best in country music, and as some of our dear friends on the West Coast up in the East call it, that good old country and Western music, you're going to see some good bluegrass, which is part of country music. You're going to see Broadway tunes. You're going to see Dixieland. You're going to see rock and roll. But you get a good show place for American music. And that's what we market. We tried to promote and build the Nashville experience of coming to Nashville and seeing, whether it be the Parthenon or whether it be seeing, downtown, or which has changed so much since those days. And yes, while you're here, enjoy Opryland and the Grand Ole Opry.
When you think about people who had dreamed of coming to Nashville, to Music City, USA, to go to Opryland and to go to the Grand Ole Opry, for many of those people, that was a lifelong dream. They had saved their nickels and dimes and put them in fruit jars, to get enough money to make that pilgrimage from Ohio or Iowa or wherever it was to come to Nashville, Tennessee, come to Music City, USA, to go to the world-famous Grand Ole Opry, to see Roy Acuff, to see Minnie Pearl, to see all those bright young people who are working out there at Opryland who are going to be the future stars. We had to deliver that.
And many people did come. By the time the park closed in 1997, well over 40 million visitors had passed through the gates. Visitors from the Nashville area, the rest of the country, and the rest of the world came to have the unique Opryland experience.
It didn't have the big rides, like some of the parks have, but it had a little bit of something for everybody. Everybody from grandparents to little kids to mid-sized people to everybody. It was something the entire family could come in and enjoy themselves. Everything from the shows to the rides to, there's a bevy of entertainment out there every day. If I had to say my one favorite thing about it is just the laid back, easygoing nature that the park had, it seemed like. It made no difference where you was in the park. Whether it was standing in line to get food, waiting in line to get a ride, everybody there was extremely friendly. You always felt safe, you always felt welcome.
There were people who would come to that park virtually every day it was open. And they didn't do it because they were trying to set some record. They did it because they loved the park.
And I would just be amazed. I'd go up and I'd say, Mr. Smith, how many times have you been here this year? Well, I've been here 112 times so far. I've only missed 3 days.
They got to know the entertainers. They got to know the area hostesses, the young ladies or the young guys who would sweep up and keep the park so clean and immaculate. They knew everybody in that theme park, and the people in the theme park knew them. We had one gentleman who wore his own name tag, made his own name tag, had a book, and asked all the employees to sign it. And at the end of the year, he'd have every employee's signature on a book.
The Johnsons have already bought the Opryland season passes for just $35. But
the season pass program that we had at Opryland was really, really important. We would have 20 to 25,000 season passes every year once we started that program. And what that was great for was the local people who, some of them had children, and they could come out and they'd bring their children. The children could go play in the park because they knew it was safe. They'd go see their favorite show, and some of them could sing every note of an hour-long show. They had seen it so many times.
All my friends and I bought Good Times passes, which were, you could go at 5 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock when it closed. And our moms would drop us off, and me and my very best friend, Delora Murphy, would go over there and just have the run of the place. And it was safe, and you could, it was freedom, but it was also sort of protected freedom. But unlike the skating rink, there were no chaperones, and we could do what we wanted. It was incredibly fun.
The one thing you have to understand about back then versus now, back then parents didn't even blink their eyes twice. Okay, hey, let's go drop the kids off at Opryland, and hey, drop them off at 9, 10 o'clock in the morning when they open. Don't pick them up till 9 o'clock at night. Hey, I got a day to myself, So it worked out really well. So we'd go 3 or 4 days a week. Of the money spent from my season passes, it was money well spent because it was very well used.
The first thing I think of when I think about Opryland is being 10 years old and going down the Flume Zoom with my mom and dad and sister. And that would have been back in the mid-70s, and my dad had the big long sideburns, and we'd go down the Flume Zoom and get entirely wet and beg and beg and beg to do it all over again. And you know, when I was a kid, that was the highlight. My grandparents lived here in Nashville, so we would come to see Nanny and Papa. And then Mom and Dad and my sister and I would come to Opryland for a day. And that was like the biggest, best thing. And we'd ride the rock and roller coaster. We'd go see all the shows.
From the characters dressed up as guitars and the sounds of it, I mean, the sound of a train whistle, kids laughing, and there was always music somewhere, and everywhere you walked there was some stage that you could hear it. It just had a great feel to it. One of the things I remember most clearly, especially as we were 14, 15, 16, before everybody got jobs and summer jobs, we would ride the Sky Ride and endlessly flirt with the boys going the other way. And we didn't really want to meet the boys. We didn't really want to have anything to do with the boys, but it was really fun to, you know, again, it was safe and protected. You could ride and wave and flirt, and it was delightful.
Yeah, there was a lot of flirting at Opryland. Lots of it, I'm sure, more than I was aware of, but I saw plenty.
It was our place to go. I guess kids now go to the mall. We went to Opryland, and just never got sick of it. And once you bought the Good Times Pass, which I can't remember, I'm thinking it was like $23, and it wasn't much for a whole summer of, 5 hours a night of endless, riding and playing. It really didn't cost anything. You might need money for a piece of pizza or an ice cream bar, but other than that, you just went and had fun.
Pizza and ice cream bars weren't the only food you could find. Guests enjoyed Christie cookies, burgers at Chubby's Drive-In, the Chicken Shack, Longhorn's Barbecue, and everyone's favorite, the Monte Cristo sandwich at the Cafe Mardi Gras.
Over in the 50s area, there was a place called Julio's Pizza. I know it's been closed now 10 years. I still crave that pizza. They had the best pizza, and they did it right because they had the fans blowing from behind the ovens, apparently. So of course it fumigates the area, so you walk by and you're like, So yes, yeah, that was my favorite down there. That and the little drinks that looked like fruit. You'd have orange drink, you'd have a grape, you'd have this and that, whatever. Those things were always really good. It's like a Kool-Aid type drink, but it was great for the kids because you walk up, tell them which one you want, they grab it, sniff the top, and there you go. Somewhere at the house, I've actually got 2 or 3 of them still. I don't know where I don't know where I've put them, but I know I've got them still.
I just remember we would go find a parking space, and you would stay all day long, and then just nearly be in tears when you had to go to the car. But I wanted to ride it one more time.
Hi there. I'm Lee Greenwood here at Opryland in Nashville doing 2 things I love, meeting fans and singing.
We love it too, Lee.
Thanks.
Rides and amusement were part of the experience, but at Opryland USA, the live show was king. At its peak, Opryland employed almost 500 performers in live entertainment.
See you at Opryland.
I think that's what was unique about Opryland because I think more than even a park where you went to ride the rides, many season pass holders came to see the shows.
Even until Opryland closed, Opryland was the only show park in the country where massive amounts of performers could come and perform live. What you saw and heard was what was there.
So the rock and roll show would be 5 or 6 musicians. Way out west had an orchestra of 16 or 17 for me and my gal, 16 or 17. Music had an orchestra of 18. So at one time we were probably hiring more musicians than any other place on planet Earth. We were up to 168 musicians. And so you're thinking, how many trumpet players do you need? How many bass players, drummers? It was incredible. Because we were double casted in the peak of Opryland. You could go see I Hear America Singing 8 times. Well, The same people wasn't doing all 8 shows. You'd have one cast come in and do the morning shift and do 4. Evening shift come in and do 4 shows. So there'd be a cast of 18, that's 36, and if we had 12 musicians, that's 24 just doing that show, covering that 8-hour shift. That was a big asset because kids wanted to sing. They didn't want to sing to tracks. They saw the experience that they could get there doing 4 shows and sometimes 5 shows a day, the same thing for 6 days a week, and it was such a training ground.
We auditioned all over the country, literally to pull performers to Nashville, Tennessee for Opryland Theme Park. That's one reason our shows were of the caliber that they were.
We're on. Hi.
This is Margie Weinman, and I'm from Vincennes, Indiana.
Topeka, Kansas is where I'm from.
I'm from Natchez, Mississippi.
And I'm originally from Monroe Falls, Ohio, but I call Nashville, Tennessee my home now.
Kids came from everywhere to be in the shows at Opryland.
I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
You'd have people from, New York, LA, Chicago, and everywhere in between. And sometimes people from just small towns that all of a sudden you thought, wow, and they would come.
1978, I was hired as a musical director for I Hear America Singing. And in 1987, I was put on staff as a musical director. When I was put on staff, part of my job was the audition tour, where we went to 32 cities in a little over 3 months' time every year, which was pretty grueling, but that's what we had to do to find the talent to get them to Nashville.
I got a chance to sit in on the kids' auditions, and that was always lots of fun to see the kids sing their songs and sometimes not sing their songs.
They auditioned thousands and thousands of people, and to be picked was just an honor itself. But once you were picked to be in that show, you got into the show, and then you had to re-audition for your solos. So you might be stuck with nothing, but it was still a great training ground. And when you told anybody you worked at Opryland, it was like, whoo, you're it.
We would have huge casting meetings, and we'd have applications. We'd have 2,000-3,000 applications every year from our audition tour that we gathered, and we'd line them up in the rehearsal hall. We'd have tables, and we'd have big billboards across the walls and big empty sheets, and every show was listed. And the directors would fight. I want this one. No, I need this one. No, I need that one. Gene, our choreographer, would try to determine the dancers, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating.
That was before American Idol. It was before Nashville Star. I mean, there weren't a lot of talent shows. I guess there were a couple on television, but that idea that you could be somebody, that you could be a star, that you could go to Nashville and be in Opryland and be a star, and we thought they were stars. The people on those stages looked bigger than life.
I auditioned for Opryland at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I got the call in school. I went back and I was in Mr. Rogowitz's government class, and the secretary of the school buzzed into the classroom and said, "Shelley Wright has a phone call." Now, we weren't allowed to get phone calls, and certainly not in Mr. Rogowitz's class. So I went to the office and I said, "Hello?" And it was Joe Gerald's, and he said, "Shelley, hey, we tried to call you at home, but there was no answer, and we want to know if you want to be in Country Music USA." And I said no at first, actually. I said, "Oh, gosh, no, thank you. I'm going to go back to Branson and do the Jubilee, but thank you." And he said, I don't think you understand how many people across the country have auditioned for this show, and we're only hiring, 9 new people. And this is a big deal. You need to think about it. And I said, "Well, call me back, but I think I'll pass for now, but you can call me back." And he ended up calling me back, and I had rethought the entire situation, and I told him, "I do want the job. I want it." I tested out of school a week early and packed up my car, drove myself to a trailer, a mobile home, which I had rented over the phone in Laverne, Tennessee, and got some sleep, got up the next day and went to Opryland, showed up 3 hours early because I didn't want to be late. As soon as I realized the depth of talent and the fact that I was lucky enough to be included in that pool of talent, I have to say I was excited every day.
Today, I think that all the people that come to Nashville, the would-be songwriters, would-be performers who don't have a venue, and here was a step they could actually work their craft.
It was a great education, I think, in performance for a lot of people because they were new at it too. And probably people like Shelley Wright would tell you that taught her a lot about performing on stage because you know how to get that reaction and you learn about stage presence and you learn these things. I think it really helped them to polish their craft, as you say, as performers.
I liken being an Opryland performer to being an athlete. We were doing 4 shows a day outside, and we didn't, the only times we changed the shows is if we had rain on an angle, which would make the ramps wet and dangerous for us to perform on. You don't ever give less than 100% on stage, and I really, really learned the craft of that at Opryland. And if there was a temptation to, maybe not give a speech on stage or introduce the next act with as much, with fervor, even if there was a temptation to say, all right, it's the Oak Ridge Boys, you didn't do that. And there was a professional benchmark that we were taught, and they pounded it into us, and I'm forever thankful because I really believe that I became who I am as a performer today because of my days at Opryland.
It was a place that taught you that when you perform, you're not there for yourself, you're there for the audience. And even the directors would say, you're not here for you. You're here for these people walking through the gates. They work hard all year long so they can pay, and their kids can come in here, and you're going to go out there and you can give them everything you got, and you're going to let them know how much you appreciate them. And that was the deal, It taught you to deliver the goods because you wanted to, and you wanted them to feel the same thing you were feeling. Not, come on in and appreciate what I'm doing. I'm such a great singer. Because a lot of people that were doing stuff on a regular basis out there, technically they weren't the greatest people in the world, but they had that thing. They could go out and they could make you feel it.
Yeah, you wanted to do a good show, and Bob would always say the people seeing the third show didn't see the first show. So you can't do any less on the third or fourth show than you did on the first. That's what we expect. So, and that was the whole work ethic and commitment that we would, as a staff, drive home.
That's the reason why you would see people working so hard on that 5th show, because I didn't care. Man, it felt great to do that 5th show. I didn't care how hot I was and how my outfit had already been sweated in 4 times already. I'll put that darn thing on again. Man, that shirt is cold, but I'll put it on, by gosh, And that was the thing, man. You just went out there and you just went for it. They found people that loved it so much that there was not a question of, I just don't want to work that hard this show. They found people who would work at it and just knock themselves out over it, man.
We had literally, in the 80s, any one given moment, we had hundreds of Opryland performers on stage in Broadway. Hundreds. And even today, you can't go to Broadway shows without seeing, even though the park's been closed for 11 years, you can't go to New York today without seeing some prior Opryland performers. You can't. They're everywhere. And it's because of the training that they got, again, from that creative staff. In our prime, anything we did, I would compare it to anything in Broadway.
One of the most memorable moments in the park's history occurred on March 16, 1975. And it didn't just occur on stage. It occurred on stage and in the parking lot and in the offices and everywhere else for that matter.
The year that I worked there, the park was all sparkling clean, painted, gift shops completely stocked, restaurants ready to open. We were ready to open the gates and let the tourists in, and the flood hit.
To see everybody pull together to come in and clean, and I'm talking about secretaries and accountants and the maintenance guys and all members of management. We were out there sandbagging while the flooding was going on, when we were out there sweeping up trash and picking up trash and retrieving 500 country hams that floated down the river. We didn't retreat them, but that literally happened. And again, I think back on that. It was traumatic for us at the time, but the way everything pulled together, and we opened 2 weeks late, and nobody could tell we had even been flooded, and we were flooded. I mean, the water was over the lights in the streets. I had to take a canoe over to the personnel office, which was in a trailer, and haul the records for the new employees that we had just put on the payroll and took them up to one of the motels up there on Music Valley. So
it was incredible. It was like somebody had taken mud and coated everything in the park from about 8 feet down. And so we went in the character lounge, and there they were, just caked with Cumberland River mud. And we had to scrub and scrub and scrub. I remember being out there with a hose and brushes and putting shampoo in these shag rug hair that my character had, and cleaned them inside and out. The inside, if I remember, it was kind of lined with some type of leather or leather-like material over the foam pads and all. So we finally got them in shape. And then in about mid-July, it gets up in the 90s, and then the costumes, it's about 110. And the hotter it would get, the more it would smell like the Cumberland River in your costume. It was sweet.
Everyone at the park pressed on and put together an impressive array of live performances.
We looked at the park and we said, who are we not entertaining? What segment of the population are we not doing a good job for? And that's how we chose to do some of the other shows in the park. We started out with Country Music USA, and it was a mainstay, and it was really the backbone show.
We did, a lot of the early older country stuff. Keep on the Sunny Side of Life. We'd touch on all those early Johnny Cash, Bill Monroe, and then we would move into Stand By Your Man, Loretta, and George Jones, and we'd move on into Kenny Rogers and Dolly and that era, Ronnie Millsap, some of those big hits and duets, and then we would even keep moving into some more contemporary stuff. The finale was Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. It worked. It was a built-in standing ovation. They didn't want it to be a country park, though. They wanted it to kind of showcase more music than just country. So we had the bluegrass and the country show, but we also had the rock and roll show, the I Hear America Singing show, which was a decade show of music from the 20s all the way up to whatever current year we were in, the 70s, 80s, as well as a turn of the century show for me and my gal. And so we had lots of different productions. So I think that helped solidify the idea of Music City as more than just country music. We do it all here. So I think that was a big help with bringing tourists in, that they could see country as well as other stuff.
We did everything from bluegrass, country music. We had a little gospel music in there to try to make it appeal to all people, not just country music fans, but anybody that loved music.
I was Gene Shepard, Patsy Cline, Loretta Lynn. I was always the Loretta Lynn part, which I loved. She and Connie Smith are my favorite artists of all time, so to get to emulate them was really cool. In the second half of the show, we did the more contemporary artists, and I was Winona Judd and my best friend out there at the time, Kelly Arwood. We were the Judds, and that was my favorite part of the show every day. We had amazing singers in that cast over the years.
You had to research every person you did. When they offered me the character of Minnie Pearl, I had to go out and research. I couldn't just go on the stage. It was, you have to go to her museum. You have to read her books. And they would quiz you on it. So, and then you would go out and entertain, 5 shows a day? Oh my gosh, in the burning heat.
Howdy. One of my other favorite memories of Opryland is there was a rock and roll band. And I can't remember which stage it was on, but I think it was near the carousel. It was by the lake. I thought when Peter Frampton was on the radio with I Want to Show You the Way or whatever the song was, I thought he had ripped off the band at Opryland because they played these cover songs night after night, and we were just groupies. We would go to every show and just sit and hope we could meet the band members, and that was sort of our first taste of, I guess, rock and roll life.
I Hear America Singing. Oh, man, I thought that was It really was. I mean, I don't think it's because of I was a kid, but it was really impressive.
My favorite show was I Hear America Singing, because I wasn't as much of a country fan then as I am now. I appreciated the history of it. But I Hear America Singing was show tunes, and it was everything from Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue up to Connie Francis. I mean, it just covered all of American music. We loved it when it rained because we basically got paid for being there. You know, we couldn't take the characters out in the rain, so we would go to the shows. And since we were all musical theater people, we knew the shows. I mean, we would watch them so many times that we would then go back and do I Hear America Singing, I Hear. We would do the whole show and act it out. And we just made up our own little shows. It was a blessing to be able to work there and have that as a memory.
Some of the talent there was just awesome. You know, awesome voices, and they really put on a good production. Every single show was a good production. And, you know, I think that's really what separates it out, because if you look around at theme parks nowadays, you don't have that level of quality there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they don't put on good shows, but the level of quality was always there, you know, which was awesome. Of course, you know, looking back at it now, I can appreciate it a lot more than I could, you know, whenever I was a little teenager, you know, running around the park.
I was in Universal this past year, and we saw every show there, and it was produced well, and the music was good. It all sounded perfect because it was all recorded and it was all tracked, and like you said, the singers were lip syncing. But the spectacle of the costuming and just the way they would produce it was awesome. But when you strip all that away, it was just they were just lip syncing, and that's kind of sad. But that's what we've gotten to.
I showed up every day with great enthusiasm and great excitement, and just to know I was on the property of the Grand Ole Opry was pretty special. It was hallowed, sacred ground to me and to the rest of us in the cast. We knew what we were doing. We knew it was a big deal.
From 92 to 97, I did the Opryland Kids Club, and we'd have these little ones come up, and we would have these coloring books we would hand out, and sometimes the kids would want our autographs. And I can't tell you how many times we'd sit out there and barely have time to come in, get a drink of water, and be ready to do the next show. But we had season pass holders that would invite us to come over and go for a swimming party. I'm thinking back, you know, in our 21st century, we think, wouldn't that be a little bit dangerous? But there was a real feeling of just down-home goodness that was sort of a part of the people who came and the people who performed there. It truly was this little bubble of time and space that had a lot of magic in it.
The shows were great, but so were the rides. New rides were added almost every year. From the Rock and Roller Coaster to the Old Mill Scream, to the Barnstormer, to Chaos, to Hangman, everybody had their favorites.
The Screaming Delta Demon, that was one of my favorites. You know, basically it was a bobsled type ride built by Intamin AG out of Germany. The way the car was made, you had 3 sections. You know, 2 people sat in front of each other, and pray you wasn't the front one because the head bolts stuck out. You'd get to the top of the thing, and you'd like bobsled through the whole ride. You know, and you could lean into it, and it'd go on up into the turn. Awesome, awesome ride. I haven't ever seen another one like it. You know, I'm sure there's other bobsled rides out there. It just ain't the Demon.
I always liked the rock and roller coaster. I would ride that over and over and over, get off, run around, go back up the steps. The log ride or the flume zoom, it's the log ride to me. I can remember the first time I rode that like it was yesterday. I was little bitty.
It was actually one of the better log rides that I've ever been on.
I loved the flume zoom from the early 70s before I ever worked for the park. I think that was my favorite.
Most of them stay relatively close to the ground. This one really didn't. You know, you'd go up the uphill, and I mean, the track was very long. You know, I mean, it looped back and forth, and finally you would come around a little bend, and you'd have a drop hill.
Of course, we love the Tin Lizzies, my girls. You know, we love the Tin Lizzies.
If you had kids and grandparents with you, perfect ride for the two of them to ride together. Little cars that ran around the little track all the way through. You had a bridge that you went over, and for a kid, you know, that was an awesome ride. And as a matter of fact, it's still in operation up in Kentucky Kingdom.
You know, they were kind of the nerd ride. You know, nobody wanted to admit that they liked it, but it was really fun because, especially for kids, because they felt like they could drive a car.
I'm going to ride the Tin Lizzy. I'm going to drive it.
We would fight over who was going to get to drive. My sister and I would fight over, I'm driving, no, I'm driving. And the Wabash Cannonball, that was a big deal when that came. I think I was like in second grade when that came, and it was a big deal because it was a big roller coaster that went upside down.
Then they had the trains, 3 different locomotives. You had Rachel, Beatrice, and Elizabeth. Rachel was a coal-burning train. Most all trains that you see in theme parks are going to be diesel powered to make. They're built to look like a coal burner, but no, there ain't no coal there. This one actually was. And, you know, all the little train enthusiasts all over the place, they just fell in love with that train, and the people that worked there fell in love with that train because it was an old coal burner that ran on the narrow track. You don't see those anymore, you know, especially operating. It was a nice touch.
This here's a warning. Beware of that Grizzly River rampage at Opryland.
Awesome rapids ride.
That was a big deal when it came in, and you usually got wet on that. And you would go into this cave, and do you know, even after I was grown and had children, I was scared to open my eyes because they had this stuffed bear in there, and that just spooked me. And even after I was grown and riding it with my children, I still didn't want to look at the bear. That's crazy.
You'd ride the rapids all the way through the cave. You know, you had the bear in there and all that, you know, old grizzly bear thing. You come out, and then you go down big long rapids. At the end, you was guaranteed somebody's getting drenched. You never knew who was going to get it, but trust me, I spent many soggy days out there with my feet squishing, so yes, I know.
Park guests weren't the only ones seen on the rides.
Roy, tell the country music fans what we have for them here in Opryland.
Part of the appeal of the park was the opportunity to see country music royalty up close.
Not bad for a start.
Roy Acuff, to put it very mildly, he loved that park. It was his park. He called it my park.
Roy loved to go around in the park and just sit out in the park and greet people.
He would sit on the bank of the Grizzly River Rampage, and he had a little special place and had a chair, and he'd sit out there and wave at the people in the afternoons, and he would sit out in front of his museum and sign autographs.
That was a wonderful thing to have him do that sort of thing, you know, and that was a unique situation, but he was a unique person, and that gave him a lot of joy in the last years of his life, though, to be part of that. When he'd do a show on the Opry, he'd always invite people. During there somewhere he'd work in, come see us at Opryland, USA, Nashville, Tennessee, you know. He'd always throw that in there.
I don't think that could have been a better spokesperson for Opryland, for the Grand Ole Opry, for Nashville.
Payment value was second on that list, and then the landscaping was third, and the rides were somewhere in that mix. The attitude and the personality and the freshness of those 1,200 youngsters that was out there selling popcorn, putting people on rides, serving food in the restaurants, sweeping the street, keeping the place clean. And cleanliness was another very important factor. That's why we washed down that concrete every single night.
Coming to work at Opryland was like a dream. I don't think anyone could have been more enthusiastic than I was. My wife still says that I put in 3 and 4 weeks at a time without taking a day off.
These people lived it, breathed it, ate it 24 hours a day. It was who they were, and they loved it. And it was fascinating to me because I'd never seen anybody love a job like that. And they couldn't do enough. They couldn't work enough. And then when you become a part of that, you want to feel that magic. And it was magic. It really was.
I will run into someone that says, you know, hey, Shelley, I was an Oprylander. Yeah, what years? Oh, I was there after you were there. And they say, oh, they talked about your cast for years and years. And there's an instant connection with somebody that you feel like you know them if they did their time at Opryland.
It was a safe feeling park. It wasn't the biggest park out there by no stretch of the imagination because the whole property was only 212 acres. You know, so it's small enough to be, you know, sort of warm and cozy, really. And I'll say this, you know, the employees made the park. You know, you can put those rides anywhere you want to put them. Without the people, you know, to make the magic happen, it wouldn't have been the same park.
And it wasn't just the entertainers. It was the people that swept up the park, the people that cooked the burgers, and everybody.
They made them proud to work there. They really did. And the people taking the tickets at the gates, man, they were happy to be there, buddy. They were. They really were.
Growing up in that and having the opportunity to work in that was magic. It was. We can talk about Disney being magic, and Disney is magic. But Opryland was magic. There was nothing ever like it.
Unfortunately, the magic couldn't go on forever. On December 31st, 1997, the park closed for good.
I guess what sticks out to me the most is Christmas of '97, when the park was closing, and when people knew the park was closing. And I forget now how, if they had kept it under wraps until at least the fall, but during Christmas of that year, I was performing. I wanted to perform on my kids' club stage, so we did a little outdoor Frida Frost show. And people were literally coming in with hammers and screwdrivers and unscrewing things from the park and walking out with memorabilia, just because it was very important to them to have a piece of the park. And I remember December 31, kind of locking up the theater, and everybody was very sort of somber and hesitant to kind of turn off the lights.
Even though the park is no longer there, time hasn't dimmed the memories of those who loved it.
Typically, on an average day, I get 300 to 400 hits a day on my site, which, you know, it kind of surprises me, really. You know, because like I say, I built my site. It started up small, you know, and I've added pages and added pages, added pages, added pages. But whenever I started it, you know, way back when, I never thought that I'd be getting 300 hits a day, you know, on a theme park that's been closed for 10 years, you know. And, you know, over the span of time here, you know, I've had well over 100,000 hits to the site. A lot of feedback through emails, guest books, you know, discussion forum. Tons and tons of emails have poured in, you know, everything from people that used to either go to the park, worked at the park, or something. You know, hey, thanks, you know, for building the site, you know, awesome memories.
Whenever I have talked with the kids and we've talked about it, even they say, you know, that it just was a real unique time with a unique set of people that in some way just were destined to kind of come together at that time. I will forever be grateful because I have lots of memories of Opryland and hold them very dear to my heart.
That whole first year was really great, but I guess my favorite memory would have to be getting to do an Opry matinee with Roy Acuff, the first time that you get to play on the Opry stage. And it's kind of a funny memory, too, because they would always pick about a half a dozen performers out of the country show to play an Opry matinee with Roy Acuff and Smoky Mountain Boys and the whole deal. I mean, it was like, here you are. It's like the American Idol experience, really, is what it was, because the place was packed. You know, you'd sing and they'd, you go, wow. No wonder you guys like this. Performing with Mr. Acuff was, I wouldn't trade that. Just give me a pile of money. I wouldn't trade it for, here, have it. I'll take performing with Mr. Acuff any day over all of that. It was really something that, you know, when I look back, I'm gonna go, yeah, that was one of those moments that, you know, you really wanted to live, and you did. It was great.
It was a family. I never thought of my job being a job. Never thought about it as being a career. It was who I was. And that's what made it all so uniquely special. It was the people.
It would be so much fun to go back, like in our town. You know, can I go back? Can I choose one day to relive? It might be a day at Opryland. I don't know.
When I first got my first record deal on Mercury Records, it was back in the day when I was talking about Opryland in my interviews, and some people around me were saying, don't talk about Opryland so much. It's a theme park, and just, we want to separate you from being a theme park act to we want to raise you up and build your star. And I said, but that's who I am. That's part of the reason why I'm here, and I want to talk about the Opry, and I'm really proud of those parts of who I am. I waved that flag proudly.
If somebody called me today and said, okay, we are going to revamp some of the park shows, would you come and perform? I'd be there in rehearsal tomorrow. Yes. When do you want me to be there? Who do you need me to call to make sure they show up as well?
If I had the chance to go back and be a part of it, and if they said, okay, you don't get to be Shelley Wright, a person who's had hits, you have to go back and be Jane Doe and audition and do it all over again, I'd do it. It was really, really great.
I know it sounds silly in some ways for people who didn't experience that, but to be a cast member and to have a lot of fun and do what you love to do, pretty good stuff.
If you talk to people that are just fans like me, employees,